Money doesn't just come from one place. It drips, trickles, flows, and floods into our lives in different ways. Welcome to Drip, Trickle, Flow, Flood, a podcast that explores the power of multiple income streams. We've got merch. That's right. Drip, Trickle, Flow, Flood t-shirts are officially here, and they're as comfy as they are conversation starting. Grab yours at the link in our show notes. Hey, Tony, how are you today?
I am doing well. How are you?
Good. It's very rainy here. My dogs are not happy.
I know. I'm hopefully going to get Millie outside here. I'm hoping that perfect timing when we finish recording, the torrential downpour will stop and we'll go for a walk.
It is not looking promising.
I know. I looked at the thing and it's like the whole forecast says rain/snow for like eternity right now.
Oh, really? I didn't even. Okay.
But it's like the slash, which just means it's like really cold rain.
Or like slush.
Yeah. No sledding in our future, I don't think.
I don't think so either. We are releasing this episode early second week of January 2026. And the previous episode was with Cheryl Hurst, where we talked about financial planning. So we thought that we would continue that discussion a bit, where you and I just talk about some financial planning tips for the new year.
Yep, I love it.
All right. So let's just go through some things that people can think about or start doing. I'll kick it off because this is something that I'm investing time in myself, which is financial literacy. And obviously this podcast itself, it was financial literacy. So that we hope that everyone is listening, and maybe that can be a way that you invest your time in this new year by just showing up every week and giving our 20 to 35-minute podcast a listen. Another way that I'm personally doing that is I'm going to run like my own little, just for myself, a solo book club. When I organize it that way, it feels better because if I just say I'm going to read these books, it will not happen. I will prioritize other things. I'm very bad at that. So I'm treating it like a solo book club. I'm starting with a book that I've read before, but feel it's one of those books that need a deep dive. So I'm going to go through it chapter by chapter with my journal and take notes. And it's called Broken Money by Lynn Alden. Have you read that book?
I have not. And I think maybe what would be fun is if you could take us on the journey a little bit with your solo book club and tell us what you're reading. And maybe you can, as we have some of these solo episodes, you can share some tips that you're pulling out of it along the way. And maybe I'll read some of them as well.
Awesome. I'm happy to do that. Yeah, I read this book before, but it's very dense and I don't think I gave it enough attention. But it really just breaks down like our system of money, how money works in the world. And then that way you're looking at patterns and realizing that honestly, not much is very surprising because this just repeats itself through history. And so I feel, for me personally, understanding money better is very helpful, just the system of money.
Yeah, that's awesome. I say kind of like a lot of my things, the way I do my financial literacy is a little sporadic. I watch the financial shows on TV throughout the day while I'm doing different things, and I'll read financial books here and there. But I get a lot of my financial literacy from talking to people. I'm learning a lot from guests we're having on this podcast. And even when I'm doing business coaching for someone else, often I'll end up learning something from them. And professionals, whether it's my financial advisor or accountant or whatever, I'm always trying to learn. And then I have some other podcasts I'll listen to. One of my favorites is Freakonomics, which isn't always necessarily it's not specifically financial, but you just learn all these different things. And then the other one I really liked was The Economics of Everyday Things, which is the same producer, but they just stopped.
Whoa, really?
I know. It's been my favorite podcast for the last 2 years. And I guess they're on pause. They might come back. So I don't know. I'm going to start harassing them and see if I can get them back. But so that's how I do most of mine. I think I'm a little bit more of a financial nerd than a lot of people. I will sometimes just learn about something new and then go on like a total deep dive on it and really study on it. I've actually been playing around with AI, breaking down different things and explaining things to me. And it's been interesting. And not only will it like tell me stuff, but it'll create graphs and all sorts of things to really let me learn how I learn. So that's what I've been doing to improve my financial literacy lately is all those different things. But the AI thing's been cool that I can just ask it a question and then I can ask as many questions as I want and never gets annoyed.
It's true. It can be like ChatGPT can be your best hype person.
Yeah.
It can be good at that. That's cool. And yes, I agree that I wouldn't say nerd necessarily, but you definitely deep dive into finances
Yeah.
way
It's
more
always,
than I do. You're like Gary. That's why sometimes I just need to learn on my own to understand my husband.
yeah. It's
It's
always, yeah.
always on
Yeah.
some
Some of
deep
us,
dive.
I guess it just interests us more. But I think also to throw out to the listeners that if there's stuff they want to learn about or hear from an expert or want us to dive into or whatever, let us know and we can seek those opportunities out and have discussions about them.
Absolutely.
Or if it's something that you and I aren't super educated about, maybe we'll dive into it. And even if we're not an expert about it, we can have a discussion about it because if one person has the question, probably 1,000 people have the question.
Yes, exactly. Good point. So, yes, listeners, if there's something you want to know, you can email us, comment, hit us up on social media. We're very reachable. All right. Next, how can you plan for 2026? So, an important one, I know we brought this up on the show before, but it's knowing your numbers, knowing what's coming in, what's going out, what's left, et cetera, et cetera. Seems very simple, but it's definitely a way that things can easily go sideways. And I will bring that up for both like personal expenses and if you are someone who runs a business expenses as well. I find sometimes folks are maybe a little bit on top of it for one versus the other versus both. Being very on top of both is super important. I know for us, we have our well, my husband has multiple spreadsheets, but we have a main one that we update all the time. And then we have regular money dates where we just get together and talk through things and a lot of it's making sure that the spreadsheet is updated. And a lot of it is him poking me to make sure that it's updated, which is fine. But just having those little systems in place can be really important so that you are prioritizing knowing your numbers. Tony, any thoughts on that? I know you're
Well,
going
I
to.
think 2026 is going to be a good year for being able to have your finances be predictable. I guess it depends a little bit on your income but I think and I don't know for sure, but I think 2026 is going to probably be an unexciting year for like inflation. I think things are going to be pretty stable. I would imagine that yeah, just because we've had so much volatile and with the Fed cutting rates and where interest rates are at now and the tariff thing seems to have settled. And not that there's not exciting things in the news going on that could impact things. That's always happening. But I think that this is a good year to say, okay, this is what my income is looking like. This is what I'm spending. This is what I want to save. This is what I want to invest. I do think this is a good year that if you line that out, you shouldn't see like rampant grocery costs going up and fuel costs shouldn't be going up, things like that, that should allow you to, hold those things. And anytime you're doing it, put in a margin of error there, right? Say, okay, these are all my numbers, but understand that none of them are going to be exact. And wherever you end up with the saving and the investing, that is what it is with what your expenses end up being. So that's what I would say is at this point of the year, it's a really good time to map that out a little bit and have your weekly, monthly, yearly goals. And if you put those goals out there a little bit and create the habits of putting that money in the places you want it to be, whether that's paying down debt, saving, all those things, I think 2026 is a good year for that.
It's a yes, good point. Good points about maybe not too much, hopefully not too much volatility.
Yeah, I say that. I'll probably be wrong before this episode
Oh,
airs.
yeah, yeah. Oh, okay, we'll cross our fingers. And then I think along those lines of really knowing your numbers, maybe having a more predictive year, spending with intention. So choosing very intentionally where your money goes instead of letting maybe old habits or other things decide that for you. This can be, I don't know if all of our listeners do this or not, but I like to go through all of my expenses pretty frequently, but it's something I always do either at the tail end of the year or the beginning of the new year, and just making sure all these things that we really need. And often that comes down to really minor things. It'll be like, we have 7 entertainment subscriptions. Do we need all of them?
Guilty.
And maybe sometimes the answer is that you do. And like that's meaningful for your life and it's important and that's also fine. So I'm not a fan of saying get rid of all TV and never buy a coffee out or any of that because I do all of those things. But it's just more about doing it with intention. We had a good episode on this several episodes back with Elena Lipson where she talked about using your intuition, and I think that can be really helpful when you are making decisions on where and what to spend. Tony, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think being intentional with your spending is I think it's really smart. I can't say I'm always the best at that. I can be a little impulsive, as we've talked about on this show. But just, yeah, say, okay, where is this money going and what do you want to be doing with it is really important. And yeah, it can be subscriptions, but it can also be bigger things like, okay, if you're going to go on a trip, if you have the flexibility to pick the dates, use that to picking the less expensive time to travel. Now, if you have kids in school and all the things, maybe that's not the case. But those sorts of things and really say, okay, what's important to me? How can I spend this year that still allows me to reach my longer term financial goals? And that can be within your business or personally, like we were talking about. And what are those financial goals and how do you want to set yourself up for the future versus enjoying the now? And both are important. But if you're spending with intention and when you're making those decisions, they're in line with that as opposed to just impulsively spending money and then after the fact going, oh man, I wish I had that $500 for something else. It slows down your progress and then, yeah, it can make you miss out on other things that maybe you would rather be spending your money on.
Another thing I'll mention around this in case it's relevant to anyone listening, I think this often comes up mainly in the entrepreneurial space or maybe the creative space as well, depending if you consider yourself an entrepreneur in that space. But spending on courses or education. So I'm a big fan of investing in education for sure. And I'm not talking necessarily about college or getting advanced degrees. That's up to the individual person. I'm more talking about oftentimes when we are in business, we want to invest in growing that business. So sometimes that means bringing on a coach or taking some kind of course. I think when it comes to that, those expenses are very important to do intentionally. I think they're important to do. I would not be anywhere without mentors and coaches. So I'm a huge fan of bringing people in who know more than I do to step me through, but also getting honest with the time that you're spending educating yourself and the time you're spending in action. And so sometimes I've been guilty of this in the past, and I've also had lots and lots of clients over the years who have had a similar thing where they're over investing in education and under investing their time in taking action on that thing. So the example could be, let's say you want to start a interior design business and you spend lots of money on getting educated around that, whether that's taking classes or coaching, etc. But then you actually aren't spending any of your time going out to find clients, putting your website together, right? All the things like the actionable things that need to happen, all of the marketing that needs to happen. So a good rule of thumb to think about is if something's brand new to you, where you've never ever done it before and you're just starting from scratch, you may think like you're going to spend 60% of your time in education and 40% of your time in action. And then as you move through that education, which is different for every industry, But as you move through and you're starting to get a little bit more comfortable, you need to flip that percentage to about 80% action and 20% learning. And that's just an important thing to pay attention to because it can be very common to spend way too much time stagnant in education and the real education, frankly, comes from action. So at some point, you've got to go out and do it and try it. So that is my piece on that.
I like that you put the intentionality right in there with the percentages of how much time you're spending doing what. Yeah. I actually haven't thought about that as much. I'm probably sometimes too much of the action. And then the education comes later, sometimes pleasantly, sometimes not. But I like that kind of roadmap of going from education, having those ratios change.
All right. Next one. This is a topic that's come up a lot for folks just in my life, clients, things like that. I'm sure we all know this or we've been in this place in the past. Thinking about your debt. And as we've talked about in earlier episodes, not all debt is bad. Like we can't always assign an emotion to debt. There is all different types of debt. But when we say debt in this episode, we're meaning the kinds of debt that generally you are looking to pay off very quickly. So this is the debt that usually is coming with like high interest rate or some other reason that you want to pay it down. And obviously, there is focus on doing that, planning around doing that. But I think an important note that we want to make today is doing that without shame, because having shame around your debt there is a cost to that, right? There is an emotional cost to that. So while yes, you're paying that down, there is an actual physical cost of cash to pay that down. There's a lot emotionally that can come along when you are feeling bad or guilting yourself over something that you've racked up debt on and now are paying that down and beating yourself up about that. So I think it's important to pay attention as we move into 2026. Is there a place that you're doing that? Or are you guilting or shaming yourself around a certain debt that you have? And how can you work to clear that shame so that you aren't paying that emotional cost as you're paying down that debt?
Yeah, I like that. It makes me think of that. I don't know who said it, but actually, it might have been Nelson Mandela. Be good if he did. That's a pretty smart guy. But I never lose. I either win or I learn. And so I
Mhm.
think that's the attitude you can have around this is, yeah, you racked up this debt. Maybe in hindsight, you could have done things differently to not have done that or whatever. But it's kind of like, who cares? Like you're in the situation you're in, you got to deal with it, learn from it. The fact that now you're being proactive and paying off that debt and making that progress and you have a plan for the future, then that's fantastic. You're still already ahead of so many people. Just the fact that's the mindset that you're now in. So again, if that's the situation you're in, hindsight's 2020, right? Like we could have done a million different things, and if you had a crystal ball, everybody could be a gazillionaire, right? You created the debt. Now the fact that you're paying it off, I think own it and be proactive about it. And I can't remember exactly what the topic was we were talking about, but we were talking about the fact that a lot of people they're having the same concerns, same questions, same topics going on in their world that, oh, yeah, it was the poll about being insecure about their finances in the
Mhm.
different age groups. And I don't think you should have shame around paying off the debt. I think that if you're owning it and even talking to people about it, I think you'll find that a lot of people are in the same situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that brings us to our next tip, which is any type of anything in the world, really. But if we're talking about finances, there's always going to be change, right? So we need to plan for it and we need to understand that the financial picture is always going to be imperfect in some way. So that means that we need to be flexible when life shifts, the world shifts, our income shifts, priorities shift. So not having this like rigid, it's good to have plans, but not being so rigid that you don't have room for to be flexible.
Yeah, and I think that goes into kind of everything this podcast is about of educating yourself, creating different income streams, saving, investing, really building up this financial world that has a bit of a force field around it to protect what's in the middle. That by being prepared, and I guess that's what we're talking about for this whole episode and leading into 2026, but by doing this and understanding that no matter how much planning you do, that it's not going to go right. The best laid plans, mice and men, they're going to go awry. And if you build that in and plan for it, then it's not this big emotional toll. It's not going to be such a devastating impact that if you say, you know what? Yeah, this isn't exactly what I expected, but I planned for the unexpected. I planned for some change. Then you can keep moving forward as opposed to taking a big steps backwards.
All right. And then we have a couple last tips that we want to share. These are a little bit more practical and things that we've talked about on the podcast before, but good reminder. So, next one is building your team. So, what does your team look like? And our previous episode was with a financial planner. So, had Cheryl Hurst on and we talked about that. So, if you don't have a team, this can be a really good year to start thinking about that or taking action on that. And if you do have a team, it could be maybe tightening that circle. It could be increasing your communication with your team. Or maybe you look at your team and say, I don't want this to be my team. So it's time to overhaul your team and look at your updated priorities and what's a fit.
Yeah, I think as you're doing your planning for the year, it's a good time to be checking in with all your team members, right? That's your personal banker. Maybe it's your mortgage lender if you're planning on making a purchase in the future or selling or whatever. Maybe it's a real estate agent. Maybe it's your financial advisor. Maybe it's your accountant. All these things that make up your team. Maybe if it's your attorney, is your will up to date? All of these pieces. Yeah. And maybe you have some people on your team that shouldn't be, or maybe somebody has changed companies or retired and you haven't filled them. But as you're going through this process and thinking about the year to come and what you want to achieve, it is a good time to just check in, make sure that they're on the same page with you. They're up to date on what your income is, what your investments look like, if there's been any big life changes. I I don't again, probably not always do as I say, not as I do, where it'll get around to tax time and that's when my accountant is finding out about something as opposed to letting them know ahead of time. I'm not sure if he listens, but sorry. And, but I just think reinforcing that team and making sure that it's, and then this wasn't really on our list, but also we talk about the family conversations, all those things.
Mhm.
While you're thinking about it, it's a good time to do those sorts of check-ins too, because, your family's part of the team as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like those overdue conversations or a time to say, hey, let's make every 30th of the month our day that we sit down or something. It can just be something good to throw up on the calendar now so that you don't have to worry about it for the rest of the year, like what your money day is going to be every month. Okay. And then finally, it is growing. This will come at no surprise to anyone. It is growing your drip, trickle, flow, and flood, which all of you are doing because you're listening to this podcast. So at least you're one step there. But this is so important to diversify. I will say, as somebody who has always had a business with lots of different income streams, or life with lots of different income streams, just in this past year, as I reflect back and doing this podcast, because I didn't call it a drip, trickle, flow, flood before I met Tony. Like, this is Tony's method that he came up with. So I had no name for it. It was just, I do lots of things. That's pretty much how I would describe it. Now it's a more intentional plan that I sit down with and say, here are my drips, here are my trickles, here are my flows and my floods. And then here's what I want to change in that. Like, I want this drip to be a flood. I want et cetera, et cetera. So where do you want those little puzzle pieces to move? It is so much more empowering when you have a system around it like this. When you're not just saying, I do lots of things. I would like X to grow. That is not that empowering and very easy to set aside. But when you're looking at the 4 buckets and knowing exactly where you want them to go, it makes you feel this level of calm. And I would also say a level of power that I had really experienced in the past. So, highly recommend if you haven't done that already to sit down and start to map out what are your current drip trickles, flows, floods, and then where do you want to see that puzzle going?
Yeah, that was very well said. I'm really excited for this year personally. I have some changes happening, some incomes going away, some new ones that some money shifting and just some pretty big stuff going on, and then I have some new things that I'm launching and I don't know what they'll materialize into. So it is really exciting to me to see if I can turn some of my trickles into flows and some of my drips into trickles, and it'd be awesome to find a flood in 2026. We'll see what comes of it, but
Same.
yeah, but I'm really excited about it personally, just with some things that I'm working on. And I always, everybody knows this from listening, I get very excitable and I really going down new avenues. And I'm excited some of the stuff that you and I have coming up and some other stuff I have going on that I think are going to be good. But again, who knows? And then I'm excited to keep learning both from our guests and then from our listeners about what they're doing. It
Yeah.
really is inspiring to hear how other people are creating their income streams and diversifying within their business or within their life. And so I would encourage people that try it out, explore things, see where it goes. With the intentionality, be intentional about how you're growing these different pieces and where they're going to fit into your world. And then please share them with us.
Mhm.
Whether you say, man, I've got a great story to tell, I want to come on the podcast, or in a comment or an email or whatever. That has become probably my favorite part of the podcast is just learning about all these different ways people are making money and diversifying and just the creativity around it all.
I agree. It's very inspiring to see all the different ways people are doing their drip trickles, flows and floods. How cool that we get to learn that.
I know. It's pretty lucky, really. I don't know what this will be like episode 41, I think, which
I think
is,
so. Yeah, 41.
it's hard to believe that we've had this many and been able to have this many discussions and
Mm.
learn from all these awesome people that have come on. And I feel like people are getting a lot of benefit out of it. So it's really cool. So yeah, in 2026, keep all the drip trickle flows and floods coming our way so that we can learn and everybody else can learn.
Yes. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening today. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review on your favorite podcast platform. And we'll see you next time on Drip Trickle Flow Flood. Thanks, everyone.